Good morning, and thanks for tuning in to episode 15 of the What's Your 20 podcast. I'm your host, EPD Special Projects Coordinator Taylor Maris, and joining me this week is Sergeant Anthony Aussieker. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've tried to record this like 3 different times, and each time it's gone downhill.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, I don't know if I should be on the show or not.
I thought I was getting uninvited.
No. You know, things come up, things happen. But let's talk about you. Currently, you are our Grants Sergeant, but you do more than that.
Right.
Do we want to talk about that, or do we want to talk about you first?
Wherever.
Let's introduce you first.
Okay. So I've been on the police department almost 12 years. Obviously started my career just like anybody else. I do have 2 years prior experience with St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department in 2008 to 2010.
What was that like working in St. Louis?
It was a lot different. I came from a really small town in Illinois. Like the town I grew up in, my wife and I grew up like 500 people. So,
I didn't know she was from there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're from the same little bitty town in Illinois.
What town? Give them a shout out.
Hoyleton, Illinois. No one knows where it is. The closest you can get there is Nashville, Illinois, and people only know that because there's a gas station on the way to St. Louis.
Makes sense.
So it's right off Highway 64.
Okay.
But little bitty town, went to a small high school, of course, went to college, and then went to work for a city that was, their population was more than my high school. Just in the district I worked in. So it was definitely a huge change for me.
What college did you go to?
Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. The only Salukis.
Who would be the others?
There's no other.
Oh, okay.
No, it's
I thought you meant like comparatively, like there were 2 and this one was the best one.
No, they're the only mascot that is the
Really?
Salukis in college sports, yeah.
Interesting. Fun fact.
Yep.
Did you get a degree in criminal justice?
I did. I originally went in as a history major with a criminal justice minor. And my freshman year, switched them. What
made you switch? Did you meet somebody or?
No, I had a history professor I didn't really care for.
Okay.
So I guess I did meet somebody, but it wasn't a positive thing. It was like, I don't really want to
in your mouth.
I don't really want to go down this path. So
yeah, I'm not a big fan of history.
Love it. Still love it to this day. But there was one course I'm like, that's not going to be for me. And then actually applied to St. Louis University for a master's program in criminal justice. And found out the program I had applied for hadn't existed for like 3 years.
Oh.
And they called in. They said, hey, it's really funny that, and they kept saying the phrase, it's really funny. And I finally said, I don't see the humor here.
Yeah, this is not funny.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so you got your degree from SIU and then went straight to working for St. Louis Metro?
No, actually, again, I was going to apply for that master's program, and that fell through. I worked for a year as a server at Olive Garden, of all places. Really thought I was living high right there.
No kidding. I just had my wisdom teeth cut out, and Olive Garden has been the solid go-to recently. It's like all I've eaten the past week.
So that was fun. But then just kind of on a whim, applied to the St. Louis Police Department. We lived right near their supply division. I walked down one day and asked them, hey, what do I got to do to be a police officer?
Yeah.
And got hired, swore in, and worked there for 2 years.
So you left there in 2008?
2010.
2010. And then you came on here 2 years later?
2013.
2013.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you do in that? What brought you to Evansville from St. Louis?
So my wife's job, she graduated, and there really wasn't a job market for her over there. She had some family living in the area, so we moved here. And then I was stay-at-home dad for a few months, and any stay-at-home parent absolutely is amazing because a few months, I'm like, no, get me out of this
I love
house.
that you own it, too.
Oh, man. I love my boys, all 3 of them. They're incredible, but stay-at-home parenting is not for the weak.
I'm sure.
So
I've got 3 dogs, and sometimes it's hard with just dogs to stay home on the weekends.
Yeah. So then I worked for Department of Child Services for 2 years, or 2.5 years before.
So you still kind of stayed in like a first responder kind of role, being involved in runs where law enforcement is there.
Right.
And then did you know that you were going to get back into law enforcement, or you kind of had that itch, like you missed it, or how did you transition from that to EPD?
Yeah, I knew leaving that I eventually wanted to work for a police department before. It was something that, again, I never envisioned myself as a police officer. And then
what did you envision yourself as?
A lawyer. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I had this dream of going to law school. And I took Latin in college because I'm like, oh, that'll help me out. And I was in that class for 5 days before I dropped it.
So Latin failed, history failed, law enforcement it is.
Yeah, I guess. Good thing it's a net, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and fun fact, to be a law enforcement officer here at EPD, you don't even have to have a college degree.
Right.
So you could have skipped all that.
Well, but I mean, it's a story to tell.
Yes. We all have a story to tell, for sure.
But I knew as soon as I left, I knew that, this is where I was meant to be.
Yeah.
It sounds cliche, but I have loved every single minute of being a police officer, from probationary status all the way back to the academy. I mean, class 1312 is the best academy class. I know you've heard it before. Best academy class that's ever been through Swilea.
Who was in your academy class?
That would be our chief of police, Phil Smith. Yeah. But also Sergeant Brewer, Sergeant Hollins, Drew Murray, a couple sergeants in Warwick County, and then John O'Brien up in Vincennes. But
that is a good class. Very good.
Yeah.
When I went through, it was just me and one other officer. Shout out Officer Meeks.
Well, I mean, you guys are still here, so.
We are. Yeah. 2 of 2. So since you've been on the department, you've done a couple different roles. So talk about your time on the department leading up to where you're at now.
Okay. Of course, went through probation and everything, and then my first year off probation, we had these fun cars. There was one that was 9 to 5 in the morning to the afternoon, and then there was an overlay car on third shift from 8 to 4.
8 p.m. to 4 a.m.?
Right. And then the 9 to 5 car I got assigned to, so, and we worked with some awesome guys, Phil Smith and I, and then JT Van Cleve and John Porter came out, and we were all in the same squad. But then, like, Sean Chapman was there and Wayne Hunt. I'm saying a lot of names that no one knows probably, but just some really awesome guys that, kind of took us under their wing, and we had a blast that first year. So a lot of fun, a lot of, learning for sure. But then my second year, I was on second shift with Phil's brother, Ray. And
love Ray.
Ray is as well, one of the best human beings alive. Mm-hmm. And riding with him every day was awesome.
Joyous.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't matter what we were doing. It was always a blast. And I always liked if he always sang in the car. I mean, he sings like all the time, but I would reach over and key up the mic. So then it'd have an open mic as he's singing very high pitched, very loud. And there were times that Phil and Nathan Jones would send us a message like, "Are you guys in a use of force with a woman?" Because his voice was so high pitched. But
we need to make sure he's since left the department to follow in his father's footsteps as a pastor. So shout out to Ray Smith doing the pastor thing down in Hopkinsville.
Still, again, one of the best human beings I've ever come across, and I was privileged to work with him for a year.
Yeah.
And then did a few years on third shift. I was partners with Stephen Toney, who we all call Stoney. Another guy, like, you look at him and he's this big bearded dude, but just an awesome human being. He was so much fun to work with, very smart, very good police officer. And then we were on third shift, and Josie Lewis and Blake Keene were on there too. So we had a really fun squad, and then applied for and was able to work in investigations for 5 years.
How was that? What was that like? I know we've had some people on the show, like Kaylee Howard's been on it, and who else from back there? We've had Oakley's been on the show, so McCormick's been on the show. So we've had quite a few detectives, but for you, what was that like?
I mean, at first it was that thing of like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Sure.
I finally felt like I knew what I was doing on the street. I was a guy that I'm like, why are people asking me questions? But, I'd finally kind of figured out what I was going to be doing on the street. And then to go back there and have a whole nother level of the way you look at things and the amount of detail and things like that. So it was definitely a huge learning curve. But it was, again, like I said, I've enjoyed every single minute of being a police officer, but that was so fun. Like, we worked so many cases, you're like, oh my gosh, this went from the initial call to all the way to now we've made 3 arrests on this case. And it was always fun to, take it from that initial step all the way through to prosecution and everything.
I feel like being back there, you kind of have some sleepless nights though, because you're trying to solve the crime and prosecute, and sometimes that's hard to leave just at the desk. Yeah. Sometimes you take that home with you. And I feel like that would be, I've never worked in investigations, but I feel like that would be the hard part, is just being able to put it down and leave it at work and not take it home. That's
absolutely true. That's really one of the reasons I got involved with our peer support team is because of just, mine was never a critical incident, but it was just the cumulative effect of, people don't call the police, but just to say, hey, man, I'm having a great day. They call us when their world's falling apart, and we're supposed to step in and help them piece it back together. And then in those cases where you're working a homicide or something like that, you're working 40 straight hours. And, aside from the fact of how much work is to be done, it's physically exhausting. Yeah. Thankfully, we had a great team. There's still a great team back there. Guys that'll come in on their off time, guys that'll, do anything they can to help. Those cases don't get solved on their own.
Yeah. So talk about peer support team and your role on that and throughout what you've done on peer support.
Okay. I was formerly the peer support coordinator. Sergeant Sam Sidoris is now the coordinator, but we're just there for officers typically when they're involved in some type of a critical incident. The first one anybody ever thinks of is like an officer-involved shooting, but line of duty death or in custody death or anything like that, a loss of an officer. Thankfully, we haven't had that happen, but we respond and we're there to just be a shoulder for our fellow officers. Thankfully, we have an administration that's very, their ears are open to it. So they want us to do the best we can for our fellow officers because, mortality rates for officers after retirement are incredibly high. Officers on average, I think, retire in their 50s and they may live to their mid 60s.
Yeah.
So, you commit the best years of your life to this career and then you don't have anything left. Just an overall, good, you've had Sergeant Brasher on here and talking about wellness and just looking at what can we do for our people because we owe it to them. We owe it to our officers that commit a lifetime of a career here. We owe it to them to put them in the best position to then go collect their pension for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and I love seeing the shift because long time ago, well, really not even that long ago, if an officer were to come to their sergeant, and I'm not saying in Evansville, I'm just saying in general, come to their sergeant or supervisor and say, I'm really struggling with this. It was almost like you're not allowed to have those feelings. Yeah. You're not allowed to feel in this profession. Mm-hmm. And there's been a shift of we need to be expressing how we're feeling because, there are a lot of issues and things that officers struggle with. And now it's okay to talk about it. And I think that's important to emphasize. And that's something we just got back from the International Chiefs of Police Conference, and there were multiple classes on peer support and family support and wellness. And so that's a big thing in law enforcement right now.
And thankfully, again, it's national down. It's not some grassroots thing that individual departments are looking at. There has been a light shined on this that says, yeah, you need it. And I'm very thankful, too, that our administration, our city, looks at it the same way.
Yeah.
So
going in a positive direction for sure. So currently you're in the grants position. Mm-hmm. What does that entail?
So I apply for and manage any grant activity we have. There's not a department in this country that doesn't utilize grants in some way, shape, or form, whether it's for equipment or training or facilities or we use some for our, to pay for our flock cameras around the city. So I do that. And like I said, manage the reporting and things like that. So a complete 180 degrees from investigations, patrol, or anything like that. It's a complete night and day difference.
Yeah, but you also have other things that you're responsible for as well. Like you help with records. Mm-hmm. So our clerks, clerical stuff in records, which our records department's amazing. They're great people that are willing to help us, and you have to manage that too.
They definitely untie a lot of knots for us. Mm-hmm. Especially with when I was on thirds, I remember just apologizing profusely that man, I've messed this up about as bad as I think I can. Help me fix it. And they're always gracious and thankful, willing to help us out. So we absolutely couldn't make it without them.
Yeah. There are times where I have to figure out data for the news and I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Records might know. Especially Emily, when Emily was in records. She's over at the crime prevention office now, but she's always super helpful.
And that was a really awesome post for Emily yesterday.
Yeah, Sergeant Day posted that about her.
She was someone that, it absolutely sucked to lose her over there, and I, joked with Josh, Sergeant Brewer over there about it, but just thankful that she's over there and enjoying it and everything. She was such an asset for us and so easy to work with and for and everything. So
I forget, I'm going to butcher her title, but I think it's community engagement specialist or something along those lines. So we're going to probably end up doing a lot of things together when it comes to things involved in the community. And so really happy for her to be over there. And also, so this has been, you've been very busy lately too. So you were heavily involved in 911 Gives Hope. You've boxed before. Mm-hmm. You've punched our chief in the face.
I have.
Do you want to tell that story?
Absolutely. Myself and Sergeant Blake Hollins are two people in our department that can say that we punched Chief Phil Smith in the face.
I feel like you need to add on to that because people will be like, what?
Well, it's obviously in the training environment for Guns and Hoses. Yes. The three of us trained under Chaplain Tyrone Edwards. Mm-hmm. And that was a blast. We would get down there, and again, that was the year that we were working 9 to 5, so we'd get down there like 7 in the morning, and Tyrone would put us through these grueling workouts, and then we'd get in there and spar, and then he'd get in there and spar with us, and huge dude, gold gloves boxer, and just giving it to us. But then he would want to have like a devotion at the end, and it was really hard to focus on, the goodness of God when you just got punched in the face a whole bunch of
times. By the same guy that's, praising the Lord.
Yeah, like, here, let me bloody your nose, but here, I'm going to tell you about the miracles of Jesus.
Yes, I love that. So how many times have you boxed in?
Twice.
Guns N' Hoses? Twice. You going to do it again?
That's the rumor. That's the rumor. Ben Hallmark's been training a group of us. I said I would. So as long as I can get a fight.
That's awesome.
I will do it again.
Well, good.
But I'll be 40 years old at this time, so if Chris or anybody that matches fights is listening, take that into consideration.
So Bomberger is who you should fight against?
Get out of here, Taylor. Absolutely. My wife does that too. She says, "Oh, you and Eric should fight." I said, "Do you just want to watch your husband get beat up in front of 8,000 people?" I'm self-aware enough to know that I have no business fighting Eric Bomberger. Yeah.
Shout out to EFD Eric Bomberger. He's like, 5 KOs? Yeah. Unassuming.
Well, and just he wants to get out there and he just wants a fight. He doesn't care. He doesn't care when or legitimately does not. Mm-hmm. And years ago, and we tell this story, when he fought Blake Collins, I could not stand him, and the only interaction I had was watching him fight. Mm-hmm. And we were at Disney of all places, and I saw him up there, and my wife was like, "Hey, I think that guy goes to our gym." I said, "Yeah, he fights for EFD. I don't like him." And now we consider them close friends of ours. And it's a running joke with us. But awesome guy.
Yeah,
he's
great
one
dude.
that he always tries to get on Cops Connecting with Kids. I'm like, you're missing the cop part.
Yeah.
So
Loki wants to be a cop. But so for those of you that are listening, 911 Gives Hope puts on our Guns N' Hoses event in April every year. And they've raised over like $2 million just from our Guns N' Hoses event. And when I was in Boston for this past conference, I was talking about our Guns N' Hoses and how it's in front of like 9,000 people. And they were like, "What?" They were like, "At our Coliseum, we get like maybe 50.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, this is a whole ordeal.
Mm-hmm. I think ours might only be second to St. Louis. St. Louis does theirs the Wednesday before Thanksgiving traditionally. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that they fight like strictly guns versus hoses. Actually, I have an academy brother, he was one academy class in front of me in St. Louis, and a high school classmate. He fought in it last year. Shout out to Lucas Roethlisberger. That dude's an animal.
What's your record?
Really?
Hey, I'm 0-3 and I own it.
I'm 0-2. I'm 0-2.
I'm done though.
I got TKO'd that first year, and I've never been hit in the brachial plate. And I think that's where I got hit, but it was like, I'm doing good. All of a sudden, I'm like, I can't feel my feet. And then I still blame Chris Rowe for breaking my nose before my second fight.
Well, it happened.
It did.
So we're coming back. Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
Wasn't for me, but it is for you.
If it's not, then I'm going to hang them up too.
Yeah, I get that. But you're also heavily involved with Cops Connecting with Kids. And you recently just helped put on our bingo fundraiser about a week ago.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
It went awesome.
Great.
There was a ton of work. Jason, man, he works so hard, and it's so many times like, "Jason, let me. I'm taking this from you," because he tries to do it all. But man,
he's good at it.
And he's incredible.
He knows how it needs to be done. But I'm very similar to Jason, and so I understand how sometimes it's hard to just.
Well, and he has high expectations.
Sure.
He knows what
he started the program,
and he knows what it's taken to get it where it is. Mm-hmm. So he has a high expectation. I'm just thankful that he trusted me enough to let me be a part of it.
Yeah.
But there was a ton of work, especially that week, just trying to get everything, that last minute mad dash and everything. But everything went incredible. We got some really awesome feedback, raised very good money for our program, and it's definitely an event. We're looking to have one in the spring and one in the fall every year.
And people won a lot of money too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the Cops Connecting with Kids got a lot of money, but in return, people that attended, if they won either half pot or the bingo game.
Mm-hmm. And then our games were sponsored. So, we had some awesome people. Like, we put it out, and people were contacting us and saying, "Hey, I'd like to sponsor a game," or "Can I do this game?" And it couldn't have gone better, I don't think, for our first time. And then my wife won in the half pot is definitely
very nice. Yeah, that's where all your hard work you put in.
Sure,
it's like,
I tried to go up and take the money, they wouldn't let me.
Bummer. Yeah. So the fundraiser helps us send kids from the EVSC to Disney, and that trip will be at the beginning of February. So all of that is funded from community outreach and community funding. And so this week has started the reveals for Disney, which are always so fun. The different schools that we take, they put on a whole event to highlight the kids that have earned the trip to Disney. And so really excited about that. Your school is this week.
Evans tomorrow. Yeah, I'm really excited to.
This airs on Saturday,
kids.
So when you hear this, they'll already have been picked. So
Sorry.
Evan's kids have already been picked whenever you hear this. But how many times have you gone on the trip?
I think it'll be 6.
Okay,
maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure. I didn't get to go last year. You know, Ollie made his debut,
baby.
So. But it was last year. It was like, oh, I'm excited. You know, I'll get to watch it through Facebook, and then by Wednesday, I'm like, I should be at Disney.
Yeah.
So.
But you still contributed, though, because you purchased Disney pins for people, and that's a big thing that they like to do is pin trading. And so you were still there in spirit by doing that.
Yeah. I always enjoy it because it reminds me of the first trip we ever went on as a family. Our kids loved it. So I'm like, you know, even if one kid out of the 120 or however many we bring, even if one of them loves it, I get to kind of recreate that memory.
Yeah. And I really enjoy. Have you gone with Evans every time or the majority?
No. So I started out, I was with Glenwood, and then 2 trips with Cedar Hall, I believe, and then at least 2 with Evans.
Okay. My first trip was with Washington, and I wanted Washington because that's where I went to middle school. And since then, I'd been at Lodge, and I love the kids at Lodge. I've had some great relationships with them, but I get to go back to Washington this year, so I'm really excited about that. And I love having feeder schools that feed into Bosse, since that's where I went to high school, and I feel like I can be more relatable, and then also see them as they, you know, pursue high school and the things that come along with it. So, well, that's all the time we have. Is there anything else you want to?
I burned through your time fast.
I told you, it goes by very quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
People think 20 minutes. It's like, it goes by really quick.
Yeah, I looked at the clock. I'm like, oh, we're halfway done already.
And we didn't really even have a lot of notes. I had like 4 things on here. I told you, it's easy just to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we might have you back on the show to talk some more about Disney and Cops Connecting with Kids at some point, maybe closer to time. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for tuning in to the What's Your 20 podcast. You can tune in again on November 16th. Make sure to subscribe and follow our Spotify and YouTube accounts to stay up to date on all podcast releases. Have a good weekend.